Dear listeners, we would love to get to know you better. Please write in the comments which country and city you are watching us from. Thank you.
I usually don't eavesdrop on other people's conversations, and I have no idea what made me listen to this one. It was a Sunday, and I was working in the basement on the water heater when I heard the phone ring. I didn't know what my wife Janet was doing at the time, and since the phone was right next to me, I picked up the receiver. Before I had a chance to say anything, I heard my wife's voice upstairs. "Gary, you shouldn't have called here. What if John had answered?" I would have just told him it was work-related. "Don't be so nervous. I just wanted to let you know that everything's set for tomorrow. We'll meet at the Desk Motel, room 117. Be there exactly at 1 o'clock in the afternoon. I'll bring a bottle of chilled wine and some fresh strawberries. Don't forget to wear that black silk lingerie you mentioned. All right, just make sure no one sees us leaving work or coming back together. Seems like you're a bit nervous. Are you having second thoughts?" No, everything's fine. I'm just a little scared. I've never done anything like this before, so of course, I'm anxious, but I'm not changing my mind. It'll all be okay, I promise. All right, but if John ever finds out about this, I'll end it all. I have to go before he overhears anything. See you tomorrow. Tomorrow, at exactly 1 o'clock. I hung up the phone just as they did and sat there for about 10 minutes, replaying the entire conversation over and over in my mind. Why on earth did I feel the need to pick up that Dan receiver? Janet and I grew up together. We got married a year after high school. She was the only girl I had ever been with, and I assumed I was the only one she had ever been with. She was attractive and had a nice figure. We had one son, Terry, who was in high school. We didn't have many friends and had spent our whole lives together. I thought everything was fine between us, but apparently, I was wrong. I decided that I didn't need to drain the hot water from the heater. There was some beer in the basement fridge, and it helped dull the pain. I figured I had 3 options. I could confront her directly and cause a big emotional scene that didn't appeal to me. Second, I could drop a few hints or make some comments that would make her think I suspected something. This was a bit more appealing than the first option, but I decided it would just delay everything until a later time when I might not know anything about it. The third option was simply to let her go through with it. I liked this one, but with a small twist. I decided to let everything go as planned, but at the last minute, I would give her a chance to back out. If she took it, fine. If not, I'd have to take action. Moreover, she could go in one of 3 directions. Maybe if I was lucky, she would simply change her mind and leave. I doubted that would happen. The second option was to take the last chance I'd give her. That was a strong maybe. Her last option was to go through with it. As unpleasant as it was to admit, this seemed the most likely. All right, now that I'd figured this out, I was ready to plan my move. It looked like I could turn this into a game, and the more I thought about it, the more excited I became. After dinner, I began to make serious plans. First, I needed to gather information, and then I'd come up with a game plan. I'd worked at a security systems firm for almost 20 years. For the past year, they'd been trying to get me to take an office in Huntsville, Alabama, but Janet didn't want to move. Janet had been working at an insurance company for the past 10 years. Things were going well for her, though I'd never liked the guy she worked with, Gary Simmons. Now I knew my suspicions were well-founded. Gary was married, and his wife seemed pretty nice. I was upset that he wanted my wife. Moving to Alabama would be good for Terry too, since he was set on going to Auburn. The in-state tuition was much more affordable than out-of-state. While we were having dinner, I decided that I would take the position in Huntsville no matter what happened the next day. I was planning to move. I could file a residency declaration once I got there, and I'd have plenty of time for Terry to qualify for in-state tuition. I didn't see any need to tell Janet, but I decided to mention it to Terry after dinner. I would inform my work the next morning and could head out as soon as I packed. Once this was settled in my mind, the rest of my plans became easy. Terry and I got along great, and when I explained that I planned to go to Alabama ahead of the rest of the family, he thought it was a good idea. He agreed not to mention it to his mother. I didn't tell him about her plans for the next day. I still wasn't sure exactly what I'd do, but I was confident it would all work out. I told Janet I needed to run to Home Depot for some things and left. My first purchase was a cell phone with a 60-minute prepaid card. I planned to make a lot of calls, and I didn't want them to be traced. I stopped by my favorite bar to see if I could get help from some old school friends who were less than reputable. It cost me $400 to buy 2 large bags of low-quality weed. My old school friend Benny told me I was taking a big risk buying so much, as I could be charged with dealing. I told him that's exactly what I was counting on. One of the guys at the bar, who I didn't know well, was Wolf Fraser. He was a nasty son of a gun, and everyone stayed away from him if they could. He drove a Corvette, and I spotted it in the parking lot as I was leaving. I grabbed a screwdriver from my car, and in less than a minute, I had Wolf's license plate. I knew where he worked, so I could call them in the morning. Next was a trip to the Desk Motel. I stopped in the lobby, looked over the racks with tourist attractions and restaurant flyers, and picked up what I needed. The clerk gave me some information about the motel, including a map and the phone numbers for housekeeping and room service. It was time to head home. When I got back, Janet was watching TV. I told her I had some work to do at the office, and she mentioned she was going to take a shower and go to bed early because she had a big day tomorrow. While Janet was in the shower, I opened her briefcase and took out her planner and address book. I spent the next half hour writing down names and phone numbers. Then came the most tedious part. I had to enter all the phone numbers into speed dial on the disposable phone and on my own phone. I still needed to look up a few more numbers in the phone book before I was done. It seemed like I had everything ready by the time I finally collapsed on the couch. It was a rough night, and I struggled to fall asleep. I kept thinking about what Janet was planning to do and wondered what I had done wrong to make her want to go through with it. By the time I finally fell asleep, I had convinced myself that it was my fault and that I had failed somehow. Morning came, and I felt a mix of emotions. I made coffee and set the table. Janet came downstairs looking stunning. "You look incredibly good today. Is today a special day at the office?" I asked. "What do you mean?" "I always look good," she replied with a smirk. We read the newspaper over breakfast. Our morning conversation was less than normal, but not so off that it was worth commenting on. I couldn't tell if she was nervous or excited. "I have a lot to do today. I might be a bit late for dinner," I said. "That's all right. I'll make something that'll keep until you get back." "Is there anything special you'd like?" she asked. "No, anything as usual will be fine," I replied. It was a pitiful attempt on our part to make small talk. She knew what she was going to do, and I knew what she was going to do, and we were both walking on eggshells. I got to work early and made all the necessary arrangements for my transfer to Huntsville. After signing the required documents and clearing my desk, I visited a divorce lawyer's office. I picked up the forms and information I'd need to file for divorce if my last attempt didn't work out. I went back home, packed all my clothes, and loaded them into the car. I removed the hard drive from my computer and took all the files and documents I thought I might need. Most of our savings and investments had been converted into valuable coins, which I took as well. By then, the banks were open, so I closed our accounts and canceled the credit cards. I knew I was acting prematurely in many ways, but I didn't have much faith in the possibility of her changing. I stopped by a flower shop and ordered a dozen red roses to be delivered at exactly 1:15. The whole time, I kept an eye on the clock. Timing was crucial. Around 12:30, I headed to the motel and found a good parking spot where I couldn't be seen but had a clear view of the room. I carefully laid everything out on the front seat. Finally, Gary arrived. He got out of the car with a grocery bag, which I assumed contained strawberries, a bottle of wine, and who knows what else. He went straight into the room, then returned to fill the ice bucket. As he was setting up the room, I started making calls. The first was to Pizza Hut. "Hello, I'd like a large pepperoni pizza delivered to room 117 at the Desk Motel. I might be in the shower, so please make sure the delivery person knocks loudly and long enough for me to hear. 20 minutes is fine, thank you." Next, I called Papa John's, followed by Domino's and Godfather's Pizza. Then I called the Golden Dragon to order egg rolls and sweet and sour pork. I assumed that half of them would call back to confirm the order, but that was fine because the effect would be the same. Janet hadn't arrived yet, so my next call was to the motel's housekeeping service, where I requested extra towels and another ice bucket. I figured it would take them about 15 minutes to deliver it. Finally, my loving wife pulled into the parking lot. She parked at the far end of the building so her car wouldn't be too noticeable. She got out, carrying a small overnight bag. When she was about 20 feet from the door, I dialed her number. "Hi, honey, it's just me," I said. "John, is something wrong? You don't usually call me at work in the middle of the day," she replied. "I was thinking about you and just wanted to call and say I love you." "Oh, John, that's so sweet. I love you too." "All right, I'll let you get back to work. See you later." "Goodbye, John, and thanks for the call." Janet hung up, turned, and entered the motel room. That was her last chance, and she made her choice. Tears welled up in my eyes as I resumed my phone blitz. Call number 7 was to the local TV station. "Hello, is this WWS-TV? There's something strange going on at the Desk Motel. If you have a news truck nearby, you might want to stop by and check it out." "No, I don't know what it is, but the cops are already on their way." "All right, thanks." I approached Gary's car. Luckily, he had parked in a spot where I wouldn't be noticed while I swapped his license plate with the one from Wolf's Corvette. On the way back, I called Janet's office. She had a meeting scheduled with a Rob Kelly at 3 o'clock. "Hello, this is Rob Kelly. I had an appointment with Janet Martin at 3 o'clock, but I need to reschedule. Could you ask her to call me as soon as possible at 961-4452? I tried to reach her, but her line was busy. As soon as possible, please." The number I gave was for an advertisement from a law firm specializing in divorces. After replacing Gary's license plate, I tossed it under his car, then took Janet's car and parked it at the back of the motel. On my way back to my car, I made the next call. "Hello, Mrs. Simmons? Your husband asked me to call you. He's having car trouble and needs you to pick him up. He's at the Desk Motel, room 117. You can reach him on his cell or just call the room. The number is 961-770, extension 117. No, I don't know why he didn't call you himself. Seems like he's meeting with a client, a rather pretty one. Bye." Call number 10 went to Acme Welding, where I asked Wolf's boss to let him know that there was a white Honda with Wolf's license plate in the parking lot at the Desk Motel. The next call was to the police. I reported that a couple of kids were swapping license plates on a car in the parking lot. I mentioned that something seemed off and simply asked them to check it out. I gave them Wolf's car number. The first pizza delivery guy entered the room. It looked like they argued, but Gary paid him, and he left. Call number 12 was to Janet's mother. "Hi, Mom, it's John. I don't have much time. Janet is in a motel room having sex with a man she works with. Please call her and ask her to reconsider what she's doing." "No, I can't talk about this right now. You have her cell number, and if you can't reach her there, try calling the motel. The number is 961-770, extension 117. I know. I'm really sorry, but I have to go. Please call her now. Bye." 2 more pizza delivery guys entered the room, and at the same time, a housekeeper brought extra towels. A heated discussion started at the door, but after a few minutes, everyone left. The next call was to the motel. "This is Mr. Simmons in room 117. The bathroom sink is leaking from the base of the faucet, and water on the floor is starting to reach the carpet. Could you send someone right away? Thanks." A loud Harley pulled into the parking lot, slowing down along the row of cars. Wolf stopped right behind Gary's car, but before he could do anything, a police car pulled up. The biker and the cop were having a heated argument when I made my next phone call. "Mr. Granger, this is John Martin. My wife Janet works for you." "Yes, thank you. I'm glad she's a good employee. However, she's currently at the Desk Motel in room 117 with Gary Simmons, who also works for you. They're in there having sex as we speak." "Yes, I'm certain. You have a company policy against this kind of thing, don't you? I'm sure you have their cell numbers. Could you call them to confirm or deny this? If you can't reach them, call the motel. The number is 961-770, extension 117. I no longer want my wife working at your company, Mr. Granger, and I'd appreciate it if you let her go. If this violates company policy, perhaps Mr. Simmons should be let go as well. No, I'm very sorry that I had to inform you of this. Thank you for your time. Goodbye." There was a delivery person from the Chinese restaurant standing at the motel door. The police officer was walking toward the room, with Wolf waving his arms and yelling beside him. Call number 15 went to Janet's sister. "Hi, Nancy, it's John. How are you? Hey, I have a bit of a situation. Janet is in a motel room having sex with a guy she works with, and I'm heading home to get my Ruger. I'm planning to come back and shoot them both, but I don't want the police or reporters to find Janet undressed. Could you call her and tell her to put some clothes on before I get back? She's at the Desk Motel, room 117. If you can't reach her on her cell, call the room. By the way, I moved her car to the back of the motel. She might not be able to drive. Maybe you should just go there and pick her up. If you get there before I do, you might want to take her home. No, sorry, I can't talk right now. Thanks for helping. Call me as soon as you can. The scene at the motel room door was chaotic and intense. The maintenance guy had just arrived to fix the sink. The delivery guy was trying to get paid, while Wolf and the police officer were talking to Gary. The florist stood at the door, trying to deliver the roses, but wasn't having much luck. It was time for me to go. My work here was done. As I left, I passed by the TV crew in my car. I still had the 2 bags of weed and didn't know what to do with them. I planned to put them in Gary's car, but decided against it. On the way home, I tossed the cell phone and the weed into the river. I stopped by the house just long enough to say goodbye to Terry. I told him I'd keep in touch and wouldn't cause his mother any trouble for the next couple of days. I would have given anything to know what had happened in that motel room over the last hour. As I left town, I made one more call. I wasn't sure if it would go through, but I tried anyway. Hello, Gary Simmons, this is John Martin. I just wanted you to know that if you so much as touch my wife, I'll rip your balls off and shove them down your throat. Got it. A faint reply. Yes, I understand. I hung up and hit the highway. About 8 hours later, my cell phone rang. The caller ID showed it was Janet. Hello, John. Where are you? I'm on I-81 near Knoxville. Why, Janet? What's going on? We need to talk. We have nothing to talk about, Janet. Please, John, talk to me. Janet, I'm going to ask you 3 questions, all right? Give me direct answers to all 3, and then we can talk. Okay. What did I say to you when I called your cell today? You said, I love you. What did you do after you hung up? A brief pause followed. I went into the motel room. Why did you go into the motel room? There was no response. Janet, answer me. Why did you go into the motel room? Another pause. John, I don't want to answer. Goodbye, Janet. I hung up and turned off my phone. I wouldn't need it for the rest of the trip. Since the company was covering all moving expenses, I booked myself a nice motel room and had a great dinner. I needed to settle in quickly, so I spent the next 2 days apartment hunting. It was easy to find something suitable and reasonably priced since I wasn't too picky. Next came setting up a new phone service and getting a mailing address. I registered the car under a new title and got a new driver's license. I registered to vote and then filed a residency declaration. I sent out all the paperwork to start the divorce process. Everything went fairly smoothly, and soon I was ready to start my new job. I called Terry and gave him my new number. I asked him not to give it to his mother, but I told him I'd understand if she pressured him. He didn't think it would be a problem. He mentioned that she had lost her job and was very depressed. I asked if they needed anything, and he said they were okay. Terry was my only real contact with my old life. A few weeks later, he told me that Janet had received the divorce papers from the lawyer. She just signed them and sent them back the same day. He didn't think she even read them. She stopped wearing makeup and started selling her clothes and jewelry. Every 2 weeks, she held a yard sale, selling anything that wasn't nailed down. I granted my attorney power of attorney so she could sell the house whenever she wanted. I didn't want anything from the sale. She found a job at a bakery close to home. Shortly before Terry graduated high school, Janet put the house up for sale. She listed it so low that it sold almost immediately. The sale included the condition that she and Terry could stay in the house until he finished school, which the buyers readily agreed to. Janet found an apartment within walking distance of the bakery. It was a small place on the 2nd floor, and she left behind any furniture she didn't need. She gave Terry the rest of the furniture so he could take it with him to college. Terry helped her move and then left for Auburn. By then, she had gotten rid of almost everything from the old house. Terry said her apartment looked like a monk's cell in a monastery. While his mother never denied him anything, she was depriving herself of everything. I could tell he was worried about her. 4 years went by quickly. Auburn was a 4-hour drive from my home, so I hardly saw my son. He was busy with school and his friends, while I spent too much time working. Janet had the management company send me the check after the house sold. It was for the full amount. She hadn't kept any of it. I cashed the money and put it in a folder I set aside for her. I bought a small house and spent most of my time working on repairs and improvements. I didn't date or socialize with anyone. I just wasn't interested. I had no desire to get close to anyone. Graduation day arrived, and I went to see my son receive his diploma. We took our seats for the ceremony, and Janet sat beside me. I was glad to see her, even after all that had happened between us. She looked well but tired. She was a bit older, and without makeup or any self-care, she looked a bit sad. We smiled at each other and said hello. They had just started handing out the diplomas, so there wasn't much time for small talk. I don't think either of us knew what to say. It was all over too quickly. The awkwardness of the moment was broken by Terry's arrival. He was excited about getting his degree and was talking a mile a minute. It was great to watch him enjoy his moment in the spotlight. A few of his friends came over to introduce themselves, and then the whole group set off for Gulf Shores to celebrate. Janet and I were left alone. How did you get here? I tried to break the ice. By bus. I have a round-trip ticket and I need to be back at the station by 6. Could you give me a ride? No problem. I took a week off, but I can't stay here. I think I'll head back tonight and spend the rest of the week painting my apartment. Sounds like fun. What choice do I have? She laughed. You could stay with me for a few days. I could even drive you home afterward if you want. It's better than the bus. Anything's better than the bus, but I don't think staying with you would be a good idea. It would be too hard on both of us. We never talked. I was angry back then and cut you off. I didn't give you a chance to explain anything, and it's been weighing on me these past few years. You want me to tell you what happened? To explain now, after our lives have been ruined? Is it really too late? I think so. So what could I possibly say now to make things right? You didn't listen then. Why would you listen now? I can't answer that. Even if we don't manage to talk, I'd still enjoy your company for a few days. Are you sure you can't spare a little time? I took a week off too. Do you have any luggage? No, just what I'm wearing. I didn't plan on staying overnight. We'll stop by Walmart. I'll get you a few changes of clothes and we'll be all set. It's a 4-hour drive and I'd really like some company. I don't see the point in this, but I'll give it a try. If you do anything to upset me, I promise I'll leave without a second thought. Fair enough. My car is over there. We drove in silence for the first few miles. We stopped just outside Birmingham, and I bought her some underwear, pants, and a few tops. I also persuaded her to get sneakers, though she refused to buy any makeup. I didn't push, just hinted. A little further down the road, we stopped at Cracker Barrel for dinner. She always loved eating there. We were making good time up I-65 when she finally spoke up. To have sex. I looked at her. What sex are you talking about? The answer to your last question was to have sex, but I couldn't bring myself to say it when you asked me that day. I don't know why. Either I was too ashamed, or I didn't want to hurt your feelings. I just couldn't make myself say it out loud. After you hung up, I realized you already knew everything, and it was foolish of me to deny it. I tried to call you back, but you turned off your phone. That's when I realized my life was over. You broke my heart. I know, and I don't know how to fix it. I spent so many sleepless nights trying to figure out how to make it right, and I couldn't come up with anything. After a few years, I realized there was nothing I could do to make things better. I couldn't think of anything to say. She seemed to be handling it well on her own. If you knew what was going on, why didn't you stop me? I couldn't stop you, only you could do that. You could have said something. No, if you'd known that I knew, you would have stopped for the wrong reasons. The fear of getting caught or knowing you were being watched wasn't a good reason not to go through with it. You should have stopped because you knew it was wrong, not because you might be caught. Does that make sense? Yes, but I still wish you had said something. I did. The last phone call. You mean the one where you told me you loved me? Exactly. I felt like I was giving you a chance to stop before you began. I gave you an opportunity to make a choice. She was silent for a moment. It was a test, and I failed it. I was such a fool. I won't argue with that. Did you love him, Gary? Heavens, no. Gary loved his wife as much as I loved you. We were just friends. I don't understand. Was it lust or what? Hell no, it wasn't like that at all. It was more platonic than anything else. Gary and I were just friends. Neither of us had any desire to make it more than that. Then how on earth did the two of you end up in a motel to have sex? It's a long story. We've still got an hour until Huntsville. Gary and I had been working together for almost a year. Over time, we talked about all sorts of things. One of those things was sex. During our conversation, we realized that neither of us had ever been with anyone other than our spouses. We weren't complaining about sex with our spouses. Both of us were satisfied with how things were, but we got curious. The more we talked about it, the more comfortable we became. I don't know which of us brought it up, but eventually, we started discussing the possibility of having sex with each other just to see what it would be like. No strings attached, and it would be a one-time thing. It was more like two adults playing doctor, or maybe something like, "I'll show you mine if you show me yours." I know it sounds ridiculous, but that's exactly how it developed. Did you ever think about the downside to this? Neither of us even considered it. We got to the point where doing it felt like no more than going to a movie together. I don't know about Gary, but I didn't think you'd ever find out, so you wouldn't be hurt. I was wrong. I'm so sorry. And how did Gary's wife take it? She was planning to divorce him. I went to her and explained everything, just as I'm explaining it to you now. She didn't go through with the divorce, but I don't think their marriage was ever the same. Gary was fired along with me, but he fought it. It went to arbitration. He argued that he hadn't violated company policy because we never actually had sex. The board didn't buy it. They moved to Baltimore, and I haven't seen them since. I was relieved when we arrived at the house. Our conversation had ended a while ago, and it was a bit tense. Some of it was hard for me to process. I showed Janet to my bedroom and took the guest room for myself. After making sure she had everything she needed, I wished her good night. There would be more conversations tomorrow, and I hoped our next talk would be a little easier. The next morning, she was already waiting for me at breakfast, the first time in a long while that I didn't have to prepare it myself. "So tell me about the sex with Gary," I said, unable to resist teasing her. "You bastard, you know there was no sex, and you also know why. I guess I ruined your romantic evening. Actually, you know the situation. And while he did bring wine and strawberries, it wasn't a romantic meeting. Don't make it sound worse than it was." "Well, did you guys do anything?" "Oh, sure. We answered a dozen phone calls and as many knocks on the door. Some nasty jerk made everyone either call us or knock on the door. The closest we got to sex was when I took off my shoes." "Did you have a bad time?" "It was the most miserable half hour of my life. While that biker was trying to break into the room to get to Gary, I managed to slip away. When I saw my car was gone, I broke down crying. Then Nancy showed up. You called my sister. And worse yet, you called my mother. She still won't speak to me. I'm sorry if I ruined something that was so important to you. I take full responsibility for what I did. It was horrible of me." "Oh no, don't. All the blame lies with me. And if you think you can jump in 5 years later and take responsibility for everything that happened, you're crazy. This was my fault. It was my fault. I am to blame, and never try to take that away from me. I didn't struggle through all these years of guilt just for you to take it away from me. I feel partly responsible and should carry some of the blame. Don't do that. When I walked into that motel room, I lost all my self-respect. I'll never be able to get it back. At least your call saved my virtue. I still have that, and I thank you for it every day. I just wish you had a way to do something beforehand. But now I understand why you couldn't. It's sad, Janet. I love you and have always loved you. I didn't want to hurt you, and I am truly sorry. I'm not going to ask for your forgiveness because I don't feel I deserve it. Losing your love and trust has caused me more pain than anything else you could have done to me. Janet, you never lost my love. I'm glad to hear that, John, but what about our marriage? I'm sorry, but that's gone, and I don't know how to bring it back. I understand, and that's fair. So, what are we doing for lunch? How about sushi? Sounds great. Is my outfit all right? That day, we had a good time. After lunch, we did a bit more shopping to get Janet some clothes that didn't make her look like a nun. I even convinced her to get some lip gloss, but nothing too dramatic. For dinner, we had a light meal of soup, cheese, and crackers, then sat down with a glass of good wine. It was nice to see Janet becoming her old self again. The more time we spent talking, the more at ease she felt. Are we going to have sex tonight, John? I don't know. I have some issues. What issues? Well, I'm afraid that if we make love, I'll keep thinking about you and Gary. I'm a bit anxious because I don't know how it will go. That's total nonsense, and you know it. How would you know? I'll tell you how. About 30 years ago, when we first started dating, you told me that every time you took care of yourself, you fantasized about Pam Kramer, the cheerleader. Do you remember that? Did I really tell you that? Yes, you did. And every time we had sex for the next 4 or 5 years, all I could think about was that you were with me, but thinking about Pam Kramer. You're kidding, right? No, I'm dead serious. Now the shoe's on the other foot, and you can't handle it. I had to get over it, and I don't see why you can't. Who do you think about when you know? That's none of your business. Oh, come on. We all have fantasies. Who's your dream lover? Fine. Most of the time, it's you, even after we split up. What do you mean most of the time? Who's in your thoughts the rest of the time? Do you really want to know? You won't laugh? No, I promise. Mel Gibson. You're joking. Not at all. I've always fantasized about being with Mel Gibson, and I don't think there's anything wrong with that. He's a very attractive guy. Which brings up another question. Who have you been thinking about over the last 5 years when you've been, relieving tension? Mostly you. I think about you a lot. Same question back to you. Who else? Well, sometimes I think about you and Gary together. You sick son of a gun. You fantasize about me and Gary together to get turned on? That's messed up. Not exactly. After your date, I wondered why you'd want to have sex with Gary. I didn't have any answers, so I assumed he must have been a better lover than me. I convinced myself that I had somehow failed as a partner and that you were seeking something new. I got used to thinking about how he might be pleasuring you and bringing you to one peak after another. After a while, I started feeling aroused, not by the thought of Gary having sex with you, but by the idea of you experiencing incredible pleasure. I found it erotic that you were enjoying yourself and blocked out the fact that it was with another man. Even in my fantasies? All right, we're even now. Deal with this. I'm going to take a shower, and after that, we're going to have sex. You can think about Pam Kramer, and I'll think about Mel Gibson. Problem solved. Tomorrow morning, we'll go get my things, and I'll move in with you. Can you handle that? Are we going to get married? No, I can't marry someone who doesn't trust me. Maybe in a couple of years, we can talk about it again. Ah, I see. You want to stay single in case another guy like Gary comes along. Jerk, one more comment like that, and I'll knock you upside the head. Now go turn off the phones. I don't want us to be interrupted. It only took about an hour to load her things into the car. Terry was right. She really had gotten rid of almost everything. She sold the remaining furniture to the landlord for $200. Once I finished loading the car, she went over to the bakery to let them know she was leaving. Soon after that, we hit the highway heading south. As we drove, I looked over at her and smiled. She smiled back. I have one more question. The last one, I said. All right, what is it? Where on earth did you get that Mel Gibson poster? Janet laughed, really laughed. It was the first time I had seen her laugh like that in years, and I couldn't help but join in. It felt like a small step toward healing, though I knew there was still a long way to go. For now, it was enough to drive forward together and see where the road might lead us.
Thanks to everyone who took the time to listen to today's stories. If you enjoyed it, please consider liking and subscribing if you haven't already. Feel free to share your thoughts on the events in the comments below. Take care.